Yeah, cool. No, I was just looking at when we uh, when we connected and set this up, what we were chatting about then, and to be honest, it's all connected. I think
Yeah.
because that was talking about again AI, the future of work, and how if we do it right, we can use AI to like enable more human flourishing and just do work better and life a bit better, and just by you know, looking at, what do we want out of work? What's the point of all
Before we get
machines
too
to do?
far,
What do we need?
why don't you
Oh,
tell us
yeah.
who you are? And it looks like my internet connection is unstable. Has been all week, so I don't know what the deal is. Hopefully, we'll be able to go. We'll be able to make it.
Yeah.
I'll edit all
Yeah.
the
Okay.
stuff out. But so, who are you, Simon? And tell us a little bit about what you do or what occupies your daily life.
Okay. So yeah, well, I'm Simon Holmes. I'm sort of co-founder of Human-Centric Engineering. Um, we were a consultancy. We're now running a venture studio model. So took a little bit of a pivot. But yeah, my history is kind of circles around really between the intersection of like tech and sort of people and humanity. So I trace it back to like when I was at university back in the 90s. I started off doing like a degree in software engineering and then flipped to do um, a mixture of like psychology and communication studies and things like that. So it's very very distinct. And then sort of went through, kind of actually ended up being like the tech guy in the design industry. So again, it's sort of a bit tech, but quite people focused. Um, Moving on to like, uh, yeah, running teams. So again, more tech and more people together. And then pandemic came around, and I was I was working at a global SaaS company at the time, and sort of quite early on, so we lost one of our engineers to COVID over in Seattle, and the CEO just said, right, if the offices aren't safe at the moment, this is relatively early in 2020s, right? We're just going to shut them all globally, and then we need to figure out how do we run like a fully remote sort of company, and
So let me ask you this
it
question.
turns out I was quite opinionated about this stuff. Mm.
Um, did you or do you now feel like the way organizations were structured were poorly prepared for things like a global pandemic or now to prepared to take on a technology like artificial intelligence? And if so, then how do you see that inadequacy or that problem that may exist there?
Uh, so yes, short answer is yes. Pretty much all companies really struggled with that, and still are, which is why everyone's the big return to office thing going flexible in the way they operate and think, which is also evident with the influx of AI. Both of these two things kind of really change running businesses and how we operate. And but the generally speaking, it's the hierarchical model is just it's so rigid that it's not flexible enough to deal with these sort of left field problems that come in. That it can't absorb it, and we haven't figured out how to deal with it. So yeah, it's a bit of ultimately, I think it's very anti-fragile, but it's so embedded, we find it very difficult of doing, especially people who are in it. It's like, yeah. And I think adding on to that, most companies now are run very lean,
Hmm.
with very little room for experimentation or error, making mistakes and things like that. So they can't afford to figure out how to do it differently. So we kind of ended up in this sort of position where everything's very brittle, but no one can afford to figure out how to make it more flexible.
That's exactly what I found. I was a consultant for 20 years, organizational consultant, leadership consultant. And coming out of the recession of the late 2000s, that's exactly what I found was that um, this kind of very restricted view of what they were to do made it very difficult for them to imagine anything other than, oh, we just got to take care of the money, which is kind of what I found was. And I wasn't oriented that way. I was the process guy. I wanted to change and create new opportunity and new advancement, and that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
wasn't there. It wasn't there any longer.
Yeah. Yes, I think and that's it's one of those funny things, I think. It's like it's very brittle and it's kind of fundamentally flawed and everyone's it. Um, so most people I know kind of like are unhappy with their job and they know why, but they just kind of accept it. That's the way it is. It's just the way work works.
That's
Um,
right. That's right.
and it's
And
like,
some of us don't
well,
accept that.
surely, exactly. And it's like, surely if everyone's unhappy with something, then there must be a better way of doing things.
Do you think AI makes things easier to adapt and to change?
Um, so I think the challenge is for the people of that mindset of like, well, work's broken, but it is what it is. It's not going to it's not going to make it easier for them to accept and adjust,
Yeah.
I don't think. But I think what's I see, from talking to people, I see kind of changes happening in two areas. A big one is like, the small companies, whether it's like solo founders or sort of co-founders or just small teams who are building stuff. They're just starting with like AI native things. They don't have the hierarchies, they don't have all of that. They're they're figuring out how to create and run businesses without all of that sort of legacy, like industrial age,
Mhm.
factory led and sort of hierarchical way of working. Um, and I think they're going to be proving and figuring out the new ways of doing it and proving that it works and that you can run these businesses in a very different way, more streamlined way. I think that's a big thing that's coming. That's a big angle. Another one is I do see, you know, particularly, so I tend to talk to tech people mainly, and there are some CTOs who are like, okay, we need to figure this out, and they're kind of very much aware of the need to change how their teams work and be run AI first, run AI native, but it's exciting and terrifying at the same time because it's going to change how we operate. If everyone can do 5 or 10x what they used to, then what does that mean for your company and your team? Most teams, most companies don't need or want like 5 times productivity or 10 times. They don't know what to do with it. So it's there's I think these are a lot of the questions that are going to come up, and I think this is why we need to be really intentional, to be honest, about how how we do it, because you could be money led, right? And it's kind of okay, well, we'll fire half of the people and we'll work these other half, to the bone, and extract as much value as we can. Or you can be more humanity led and think, actually, most people are really good for like half of the day, then
Yeah.
they fill the rest up with admin. We've outsourced all the admin and stuff to AI. It's all automated. Let's keep most of the people there, and everyone sort of earns the same but works half the time, delivering 5 times what they were before. It's sort of, but that will take some level of intentionality
And and is
and adjustment to the way companies run. And I don't think the older companies are ready for it.
is that what you and your group are trying to do with your human-centric venture studio project? Your this design. I mean, I look at what you've created.
Hmm.
Granted, I'm not an expert on it yet, but I see it as like other types of these kinds of how do we restructure the way we do things. I'm thinking of like the guys out in Silicon Valley who did the category design work. I don't know if you're familiar with them. And you know, I was a part of a group of entrepreneurs that studied that for a few months to see if it would apply to the businesses that we had. And it was interesting. I mean, but I think there are people like you who are intelligent and who have a willingness to look beyond the boundaries that have been established for us and say, what can we do differently? How can we organize this so that we can advance, take the good things that we have now and advance forward in a way that maybe we haven't been looking at it.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. That's again, it's what we're hoping to do and aiming to do with like the venture studio idea. I mean, I see you're reading that the white paper, um, which raises more questions
Oh,
than it answers at this point. But I think that's intentional, and that's
yeah,
understandable for where we are, right? If we're going through this transitional phase, all we have is questions, and it's like, well, that doesn't work. We've got these new things coming in. Let's figure out this better way. Again, I think so. Ultimately, what we're aiming to do, the idea is to find better ways, more human-centric ways, more equitable ways to run sort of small companies and ventures, very AI first way, building up a network of people who kind of almost like swarm around an idea or swarm around a business and kind of co-form it and co-own it, and run it, and yeah, build those full of like you know full of humanity but full of AI processes, and build the two things together. So it's like, how can we come together and use AI to build great things and have a great time doing it, and create value for the world, and but make the most of people, make the most of what we love doing, what we're good at, as opposed to this very extractive model of kind of drudgery that we see in most offices, where people are miserable about all the just the day-to-day stuff that they have to do.
yeah. And 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 that's what I saw 30 years ago when I went into consulting. That that kind of extractive, transactional, um, uh, structure centric approach where things like relationships and ideas were secondary or subsidiary and rarely actually taken seriously. So, and I
Mm.
felt like then, I mean, what I felt like then was, well, this doesn't work. And so we're witnessing the end of something. This is what happens when you take
Mm.
something and you continue to do it after its life cycle has run its course. That's the way I saw things.
Yeah, you say that's 30 years ago and we're still doing it,
Yeah.
right?
That's the persistent. That is the persistence of the structures that we have in society, and it all has to do with who's in power and who has the wealth, and 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 they have all reached those positions. And I'm not making a political statement here. I'm just making an observation. But they all reach those positions because of the structures that work for them. But they didn't necessarily work for other people. So it's and that, and at some point the failure is baked into the system, and so I think that's where we are now, which
Yeah, I
is
think so.
an exciting
Mm.
moment. It's an exciting moment because we get to start create something new.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yes, I agree. I think it's like, funny enough, AI is the forcing thing because it's like everything else has somehow they've managed to hold it within those structures. Um, and as you say, it's like this the only up until now, the only people with the power to change the structures are those who benefit most from the structures.
Mhm.
So, you know, it's just kind of almost human nature that it doesn't get
It's what
changed.
it's a
But
facet.
now there's this external force, which is AI and its capability. Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
facet of
a
human
facet
nature,
of
but if you go
yeah.
talk to the people who are in the lowest echelon of a business, they don't think that way. They're much more
Mm,
collaborative, and they're interested in the. I've told this story often, and I'll tell you this story. I was doing a webinar series for a very large global corporation, and I was doing it for one division of the company, and probably had 75 people in my group. And so I decided I wanted to go meet these people. So between the third and fourth of the last webinar, I went to where their headquarters is and spent a day with them. And it one and the guy that had got me into this program was there, and he was taking me around their building. They took me into the C-suite for this division of the company. And this was on a Friday afternoon, and there was this woman there who was an executive assistant, and typical room of two walls facing outward into the public. I mean, facing outside, and that's where the senior VPs were, and all the executive assistants were out in an open space. She stands up, very formal,
mm,
very attractive, very nicely dressed, and her formality was offensive. And he introduced me, and I said, "Well, how long have you worked here?" And she said, "I'm 48, and I started when I was 20." And I said, "Well, you must love this company for you to stay this long." And then I said, and this company was in trouble, and I said, "And it must pain you to see what your company is going through because of your love of the company." And then I said to her, what I've identified is that there is a persistent residual culture of values that persists because it resides in the relationships of the people. And when she heard that, she just all that stiff formality left her, and she melted into her seat as if finally someone recognized what we all know. This is a great company. And I said, "Well, it's a great company because of people like you."
mm,
I think those people are all over the place, and they're waiting for people to recognize that. So
mm,
so this is where my question goes. So there are all these people that are losing they're in the process of being uh, let go from their companies. Their white collar jobs are going away. But these are not people who are not performing at a high level. They don't fit into the plan for going forward. So
mm.
if you had a company of something, would you go out looking for these people to hire them to say, I want to figure out some way to go hire 20,000 people who have all this talent, all this energy, all this who have a desire to do good work. How do, how would you, if you were in that role, how would you go out and find these people and then create the structure for them to succeed in this current environment? That's a big question, I know.
That is the big question. It's like, I think, at the moment, I wouldn't even think of it as like trying to get all like 20,000 people all together, kind of like doing one thing. I still think more like more like they're more of a sort of a network
Hmm.
model at this point, and um, always have people figure it out. People will cluster together around things that they want to do. As long as you can help coach and guide people to create sort of multidisciplinary groups or swarms around things, um, and just have people get together. I think that's probably one of the hardest things at the moment is actually finding other people that you actually really connect with and would want to do something with, and
Yeah.
and could build something together with. I think that's the chance we become so separated and isolated, as a society, and even like LinkedIn is supposed to help, but that is mainly so much of it now is just sort of AI content, AI comments, lots of I don't know about you, but yeah, I get an awful lot of requests, and then like the pitch slap thing of just trying to sell me stuff all the time. And so it's quite nice, and it's rare to these days. It feels to like meet and actually have a conversation through a LinkedIn connection.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that needs to be, how do we connect more and sort of open up some of those networks? It's almost like the working world has, it's almost like it's been intentional in how it kind of separates us to stop us from doing
So, so do you think,
that almost.
do you think that, and I'm really just, I don't know. I don't have an answer. Do you think that maybe what we should be doing is kind of doing training without it being a structured training, like talking about how do you and I could be talking about how do you network, and someone be watching this. Oh, I didn't know how to do that. Now I know how to go do that. I mean, I built
Hmm.
my world around people introducing me to people, networking by introductions. And I've never spent any money on marketing other than a website, but that's the way I meet people. And so that sort of thing. Do you think that that's a you think social media maybe is where I'm going is has the capacity to teach people how to do the things that they were never taught with the structure of their former business?
I think there's potential for it to yeah enable and help that. I think it's almost a bit of a lost art, isn't it? At the moment, sort of how to make that human connection first. It's almost like buy this from me, or a lot of social media. Well, it's all formative. So much is performative on social media. It's like here's the highlight reel.
When
Working with someone day in day out for a long time, get to know them well.
when COVID came along, the pandemic came along, did did you see that one of the reactions to that was, I want to have more time in interaction with people. I want to connect with people more. I want to have more conversation with people.
Yes, and in particularly more real conversations, I think. Um, and particularly because it's strange that like everyone kind of got a bit of like Zoom fatigue, and I think it's because so often you go on a if you go on like an online meeting, It's basically you go on, there's the agenda, you go through it, and you leave. Whereas if you're hanging out, you'll talk on the way to the meeting, you'll probably chat at the beginning of it, you'll chat at the end of it, and there's a human interaction element. And I think that was kind of all of that stuff was really missing.
Yeah,
And I mean, was that your experience?
that's been my experience. That um, I mean, I started the podcast because of that, because I found that people wanted to have a conversation, and what I didn't, what I was just a dumb guy, and just fell into something, and I just started talking to people I wanted to meet and talk to. I mean, it was really that simple. I wasn't trying to create some great innovative thing. I was just wanting to talk to people, and then
Hmm.
one of my guests said, "You realize what you have here?" No, what have I done? He says, "You have created an unscripted conversation, and we don't have unscripted conversations anymore." Huh. I didn't realize that's what I was done. But the more I've thought about it, the more I've promoted that, the more this 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 little this little thing that I have, this podcast, has begun to mean something to people. So yeah, I think this we're at the beginning of something and a revolution. Is it? Maybe that's too hard to. No, I think it's actually there's something revolutionary about what I see happening.
Yeah, and yes, I agree. It sometimes feels a bit, you say, are we over-egging it to say it's a revolution? Um, but I think that's what it's going to, and it's going to be quite any revolution is going to be quite tough to go through. It's like yeah, I speak to people. It's kind of something like, okay, it's an equal measures, exciting and terrifying, and
Well,
it's
yeah,
yeah, and it's but
it's where the fun is.
for most, yeah. But if you're not one of the people who really likes to like imagine what the future could be, you tend to focus on the bit that you know that you're losing, and then that's where it gets really terrifying. Um,
See,
so I see people post quite a bit on like mainly more on like Facebook than LinkedIn, but it's kind of like you know, actually no, LinkedIn as well is kind of like most of the people sort of say, yeah, you shouldn't use AI for software development for all of these nonsense reasons. It's because they're scared about losing their job or the identity or the role or that they're living in. Fair enough, right? There's change and that's a real risk.
it's a
Um,
legitimate concern. Yeah.
absolutely. But on the other hand, we could well end up with something better if we try. It's kind of my my position is it's going to happen. You can either try and fight against it, try and just sort of head in the sand, ignore it, or you think, okay, we can. Something's going to happen. Can I can I get involved and try and at least direct or have some influence or at least try to have a voice around making what's next better than what it was, because we've got no idea what direction things are going to go in. Could go dystopian, could go utopian, or probably go middle.
Yeah.
We'll only go in the middle if people actually try to force it that way. Because otherwise, we've got so many extractive forces in our kind of world and society. It's easy to see how it could go down that path.
Well, there you can extract as long as there's something to extract.
Mhm. Very true.
And I think that's that's what the people at the top of the hierarchy recognize that there's not much to extract any longer because they've created that world by um, you know becoming very efficient and
Mhm.
focus principally upon financialization. And so there's not much to extract out of. And once you get there, that's kind of the end of the road. But if you look at it another way, I mean, you
Yeah,
look
and
at
you've
it
got
the
a
way
point.
if you look at it the way you have set it up in this white paper, I mean, you got these.
Hmm.
If I may offer a thought or two about this, I mean,
Yeah, go for it.
what
Please
I
do.
like is you're using this diagram. Let's see if I can. So this diagram, let's see if I can get this straight. This is really difficult.
The mind framework.
Diversity
Yeah.
capital, material capital, intelligence capital, and network capital.
Mm.
I think those are a great start to identifying what we have available to us every day. And each person has that. It's not a structured thing. It's a human thing. And I think that's your point. It's your point. And
Yeah.
so how do we help people recognize the material capital they have, the intelligence capital they have, the network capital they have, and the diversity capital they have? How do we help them do that? I guess that's really where what I read there. I said, how does how do we help people identify that? Because then that gives them not something they've extracted, but giving them something they've accumulated to utilize and giving themselves into the world.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I mean, it's an excellent sort of mindset shift, I think, that, sort of try and have people think more in that way because, well, we've kind of been brought up and shoehorned into it's all about the material thing, right? And all businesses, it's everything comes down to the dollar cost, right? It's kind of like, how healthy are our people? Well, um, you know, are they doing well? Well, it's too expensive to find out. So, it's a pretty broken system because it just has that one metric of money. But if we start thinking and get and help, I think you say it's about helping more people think in those different sort of dimensions
Yeah.
about accumulating quote unquote wealth across all of them, then you change how you live your life, I think, and you change the choices that you make and the priorities that you rate. But yeah, an excellent question. Yeah, how do you do that?
Well,
Um,
I think it happens in conversation
yeah.
because you're going to hear someone say something. Oh, well, I can do that too. Or, well, they have a need. I said, well, can I help you out? I mean, I think the conversation
Mm.
reveals these things when we are allowed for our conversation to be open and respectful, that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. It's yes, I mean it helps well, you're having conversations with more people, you're building up a level of your network capital. If you're open-minded, then you're asking questions and you can absorb it, you're increasing your intelligence capital and hopefully again by talking to more people, diversity just from more diverse opinions and thought. So you're just kind of slowly building up more breadth and depth across all these different metrics that will I know I think yeah, again, almost like really important for I think human flourishing is to build all of these things up together. That's right. Maybe it's kind of related to why we've got so much sort of mental health issues and depression and things everywhere. It's because everyone's just focused on that one metric of the material
Right?
and kind of very little about the intellectual and the network and the diversity stuff. And those other three are much more, I think, probably more human metrics based around communities and connection, collaboration, as opposed to the more isolating thing of I must accumulate this amount of stuff. I must keep up with that person. I want to be ahead of those people. The more you focus on the M, the material, the less you focus on the others.
What, how do you define a human metric? What's that? What does that look like?
That's a fun question. Yeah. How do we define a human metric? I
Okay, well,
suppose,
let me back up and say maybe we need to define what a human metric is and
mm,
not assume that we already know what that is. And that the conversation we could have with, 5 people or 200 people, whatever it may be, is to say,
mm,
well, what is a human metric? What is it? What is human? I mean, other people use the language of human flourishing. I think it's just as vague as human metric is, and I'm not being negative or critical. I'm just saying we're entering. See, this is what I really love about all this. We're entering a time in history where we're recreating something that 1,000 years ago they knew, or
mm,
during the Renaissance they knew, and they had ways of talking about it. But over the last 500 years we've lost it. But we're also in a very different environment technologically, communication wise. Everything's changed in the last 500 years. So we have to kind of imagine, well, what does a human metric look like, or what does human flourishing look like, and not assume that we have any real clue about that.
mm. Yeah, no, yeah, I would agree with that. So I think I think I've published it. One of the essays on my Substack it was a really difficult one to write because it's talking about where we are at the moment. It's we don't have the language to talk about what's happening and what's emerging because it's new and it's different.
Hmm.
And sometimes we try, and if you apply the wrong label, it can either kind of misshape what's coming out or it can restrict it in some ways, and it stops it from being what it can be and what it can grow to. But on the other hand, we need emerging ways to talk about things. So I think so the vernacular we use is going to emerge and change, and you can only really sort of label things sort of in hindsight, but we love to label things and understand things and kind of give things a name. Um, you know, so 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 I created this thing to help me work. So I've got ADHD, so I've got lots of ideas,
Yeah.
and I've always struggled what to do with them. Where do I put them? So I used to have like all these sort of got dozens of different notebooks, or I've tried like second brain systems like Notion and Obsidian, or just put things in a big file somewhere. None of it ever worked because it's like um, I just I never get it back out. It was never useful, and so when you stop trusting that you can get something out, it never actually leaves your brain. So I created something in using Obsidian and then Claude Code, so that I just brain dump all in one place and then it sorts it out for me. And I can ask questions, I get it back, and it, you know, it's been remarkably good. Like I then connect it into like my companies, got like quarterly plans and sprint plans and things. So I sort of found my target, what we're doing. And what I found is that it was giving me just lots of like neurotypical kind of guidance and advice. And it's kind of like, you know, these are the, 10 priorities. It's kind of like my brain, you give it 10 priorities, will do none of them, right? Because it's just
Right.
going to get sort
Right.
of like paralyzed with that list. So it's sort of, so I started giving it information about me, sort of, my sort of personality types and, sort of what's going, just extra stuff like ADHD, RSD, INFP, and all this stuff, gave it all this background, and then kind of, you know, asked him, it's built this personal profile of me. So now when I ask it things and sort of what do I need to know about this meeting, it will format these things in a way that makes sense to me. If I sort of what's my priority for this week, it doesn't give me half a dozen or a dozen. It says, right, this is the top one. This one needs to be done. And then we can come back and unlock the others. And it's just like it's such a different way of working. It's a tool that's never existed before. And I was like, I asked it, I said, I don't know what to call you because you're something, part journal, part coach, part like I don't know, chief of staff. Sort of, I don't know what to call you. And it's kind of like, no, no, that's fair. But that's probably a good thing because it actually it's this your whole venture studio thesis and things in practice because it's emerging. You don't have a name for it yet, and that's as it should be. And
I
I think
love
we're
that.
just going to see a lot of it.
I think that's fantastic. And that's maybe one of the best arguments I've heard for why AI can serve the individual. I mean, that organization of all these scattered thoughts into something coherent and practical and actionable, I think is exactly what most of us need.
Mm, yeah, and kind of stumbled on it by accident, really. But it's sort of
Yeah.
it's but yeah, it's based around the human individual and me in this case, obviously, but and that's what I'm quite excited with AI is about amplifying that individual. It's sort of because it can be a struggle for some people in like the normal sort of corporate or working world or just the world in general.
Hmm.
If you're not sort of neurotypical thing and you're kind of like masking or trying twice as hard to do half as much. It's how it often feels, right? And if you've got something there that's just helping you out and helping you just be you, but survive better, cope better, live better, that's a pretty good win, I think.
I think it's fantastic. I think it's well, and it's hopeful. I mean that I mean your story there is a very hopeful story that okay, we can apply these tools and we can get some clarity and we can know where we want to go and a lot of people have no clue about any of that. So it's I mean your that story is worth telling, and it's worth telling. I mean, if you're giving a presentation, I think that story is worth telling because I think there are a lot of people that will be in that room who have the same experience that you have, and
Mm,
and it and it's real. It's you, and that's a really good thing.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. So yes, I'm hopeful, but yeah. So yeah, okay, carry on.
let me ask you this last question. How do you want the public to interface with you about all of this? What's your mechanism? What's the best way for people to say, oh, if this is really interesting to me, how do I get together with you? What's the best way to do that?
All right, yeah. Um, well, the easiest way to find me is probably on just into my website, which is just simonholmes.com. And that links out to um, company website, links out to LinkedIn and my Substack. Um, Probably best place to message me or connect is LinkedIn at this point. Yeah, or Substack. That's kind of the probably two easy places to connect and just sort of have conversations. But yeah, I love as you can probably tell, I love talking about this stuff and really trying to just want to
Well, we'll put all
So
this.
want to move the conversation forward and start figuring some of this stuff out.
Well, we'll put all these links to you in the show notes so that people can find you and engage with you. And I encourage you all to get a hold of this white paper and allow it to be uh, something you're in conversation with. You don't necessarily have to believe any of it, but you should maybe be in conversation with what is being said there and ask the question, okay, well, how does this make sense for me? And maybe then have a conversation with Simon about it because I think that's the way a lot of this is going to unfold. We put out something to read, then we end up
Hmm.
in a conversation, and all of a sudden we're working together, or we're seeing the influence of one person over another, and that influence is simply not a number on a social media calculator, but it's actually something real.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, none of this stuff is going to improve or get better in a vacuum, right? It's kind of like, and
True.
yes, it's why I put out the stuff like the white paper and my sort of articles on Substack is to almost this is my position. Come talk to me. You know, share your ideas. Do you agree? Do you disagree with something? It's kind of
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
start with an opinion and see what happens.
well, thank you for being with us today. This has been great. I think what you're doing is fantastic, and I think it's one piece of a larger collection of things that are going on, which I think are
Mhm.
encouraging. And I think we should all be, even if hard times are coming, we should be encouraged because we're going to go through them, and we're going to come out on the other side, and we'll be in a different world, and that world will be far better than what maybe we've experienced for the last 25, 30 years. So that's my attitude, and I hope I live long enough to experience it all. So,
Yeah, there is that. Yeah, yeah. But yes, no, yeah, fully agrees. My attitude and hope as well.
so well, thank you all for watching the Eddie Network podcast, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.